So Jensen Huang is one of the most talked about people on Chinese social media.
Yeah.
After learning about his story, everyone tries to describe Mr. Huang in just a few words. However, his story is so fascinating and he has accomplished so much that it's so difficult to summarize and describe him with just a few adjectives.
It very much is, yes.
Yeah, but in your book, you chose to describe him using the words charming, funny, and self-deprecating.
Yes.
Why did you choose those three words?
Well, first of all, he's really charming. I mean, when you meet him, he's so funny. He's got charisma. He's talking fast. He's got all these ideas. He's kind of like watching you to see how you're responding to him. He's very much a people person, actually. He's very good with people. And he's funny. He tells funny stories. He makes jokes all the time. And often he even makes fun of himself. That's the self-deprecating aspect. You know, I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley are really driven by ego.
Right.
And he's not. He's not. He's driven in a different way. And so it's easy for him to be kind of relaxed and humble.
I think I agree with you because I watched a lot of his interviews this morning, so I agree with you. Yeah. Thank you for that answer.
Of course.
Okay. So we know that you and Jensen are really good friends, actually, right? And then you got to interview him and those around him. And I just want to know, like, through interviewing him and those around him, wrote down this amazing book called The Thinking Machine, and in Chinese, 黄仁勋英伟达之芯. And in the book, it's really funny that you mentioned that he is an elusive interviewee, and in some ways, the most difficult you have ever reported on, actually. So what difficulties you encounter when interviewing him and those around him? Are there any interesting story you want to share with our Chinese readers?
Yeah, so Jensen hates talking about himself. He hates talking about himself, and I think he has almost like a kind of like, almost like a self-loathing, or like a feeling that he's not kind of like personally very interesting. One time I asked him a question that was a pretty deep question, a pretty penetrating question about like his background and how various things had affected me. And he looked at me, and then he ran away.
Physically ran away,
really? Physically ran away.
Oh my God. I think you wrote that in the book.
I wrote that in the book.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very funny. And he was joking a little bit, you know, but also he just didn't want to answer the question. So in this way, he does not really want to talk about himself at all. And he doesn't really find, like, he has no introspection. So he doesn't really ask himself, why do I do these things or this or that thing? He never kind of looks within. He's very focused outwards into making things happen in the real world. And of course, he has absolutely shaped the world around him to reflect what he believes to be true. But at the same time, you know, he's not a kind of guy who spends a lot of time thinking or even talking about himself and his background and his biography. So sometimes in trying to get those questions out of him, it really was difficult. He would give me these frustrated looks. He would become almost like exasperated with me. He would say that question's too personal. You know, he didn't like some of these questions about his background.
Thank you so much. That's so nice of you.
Yeah.
The third question is, well, I'm pretty curious because, well, everyone fears that development of AI might threaten human survival. Jensen is actually not afraid at all, and he firmly believes that AI poses no risk. And given this viewpoint and his decisiveness in business decisions, many will consider Mr. Huang a very optimistic and fearless person. However, in the process of reading your book, you know, you mentioned that Jensen also has fears, such as, you know, disappointing his employees and bring shame to his family. So as his friend, do you think Jensen is an optimistic person overall? What things in life make him fearful? Could you give us an example?
Right. So the famous book on the industry he works in is insanely competitive. And businesses that are at the top one day, 2 years later, will be bankrupt. It actually happens all the time, more so than almost any other industry. And the classic book about this by the Intel CEO was called Only the Paranoid Survive. And so Jensen is terrified of competitive threats to his business. That's what keeps him up at night. He's so worried about that, he almost doesn't have time to worry about AI. Even today, NVIDIA is the largest, most valuable company in the world. They're probably the great business story of the last decade. He is convinced they could go bankrupt at any second.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. One thing he always says is, for me, it's always 1993. 1993 was the year he founded NVIDIA. And what that means is we can fail at any time. We're still a startup. Anything can go wrong. And in fact, it's not just a saying. In his industry, it's actually true. You know, in semiconductors, 1 or 2 bad cycles, suddenly you're at the bottom again. It can very easily happen.
Right.
And he has seen so many businesses around him fail over time. So I think he knows that being a survivor in this industry means just constant paranoia, constant fear of what your competitors are doing, that you might miss where technology is going, that you might have manufacturing problems. And in fact, NVIDIA has experienced all of those things over the course of 30 years.
Yes.
One more thing. This is very important to remember about Jensen. He's covered in scars. He's fought to the death with so many businesses, right? Like, I mean this metaphorically, but he is just covered in battle scars. It was not easy to get here. He had to fight for 30 years.
I know.
And I think when he wakes up and looks in the morning, he never forgets that. You know, he's not Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't have some tremendous success when he was 21, 22 years old.
Right.
He really had to fight to the death with many other companies just to survive for many, many years. You know, and there's so many instances of that in the book that you can read about.
Yeah.
But he hasn't forgotten how hard he had to fight to reach this point of success.
Right.
I don't think anyone has actually fought harder in Silicon Valley. Wow. I think he's the hardest fighting guy. And it took
what a compliment.
It took a long time too.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
It took really almost 40 years of constant work to get on top.
Okay, but while you're signing, I can ask, like, I
Go
can,
on,
you know, like a follow-up questions. Like, but overall, I don't think he's an optimistic person then.
No, his industry is. He's optimistic certainly about technology.
Oh, right.
He's nothing but optimism about technology. He's pessimistic about NVIDIA's role in it.
Oh, okay.
Because he has seen too many businesses like his be on top and then fail.
Oh.
Intel in 1999 was the biggest company in the world. They used to have NVIDIA's position. Then they made a series of management missteps. And now Jensen is personally worth more than Intel.
Oh.
Right?
Wow.
So they can all come off the bus. The wheels can come off the bus very quickly in this industry.
Wow.
I'll tell you what, something like Coca-Cola, right? It's very simple. You have a formula, you've got the winning formula, you just sell it again and again every year. Semiconductors are totally different. It's more like the fashion business.
Oh, really?
You have to reinvent your product every year, twice a year.
Oh.
You always have to be ahead of the curve of where it's going. And it's easy to miss it, and it's not clear where it's going to go. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, it's very interesting to hear that. You know, it's just like fashion industry.
Yeah,
that's interesting to know. Yeah.
I mean, at NVIDIA, just like a fashion industry, they have a spring and fall product line.
Oh, do they?
Yep, they release a new GPU every 6 months.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh. See, you know, okay, just expose that I'm not really an AI person. Okay, so I'm gonna ask some other question, which I think is pretty, like, you know, interested.
Okay.
I believe a lot of our audience are interested. So in the book, you mentioned that Jensen works 12 to 14 hours every day and 7 days per week without rest. So is this true though? Like, what is his daily mental state like? Have you learned about Mr. Jensen's time management secrets or any special lifestyle habits that he has?
So this is one of the parts of Jensen that seems almost superhuman.
Okay.
Even his other executives, all of whom work very, very hard. They devote their lives to this company. You know, they can't keep up with him. And he's, you know, now he's like 61. He's not young anymore. But they can't keep up with him. Bill Dolly, who was just his whole life is computers. He spends all his time working. Even he can't. He's NVIDIA's chief scientist. Even he can't keep up with Jensen. Wow. And he says, yeah, I emailed him at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he responds at 2:05. And then I email him at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he emails me back at 7:05. Like, I don't understand how he does it. The rest of us are just here to reduce the bandwidth on Jensen. Like, we're all just kind of like here to reduce the demands on his time. So I don't understand. He's one of these people who doesn't need a lot of sleep, it seems like, who can fuel himself to work very hard. I think at the end of every day, he basically kind of collapses from exhaustion. I'll tell a story. Jensen gave a commencement speech at Caltech, which is like a big US technical university, one of the most famous, and I caught up with him afterwards, and he was just in a miserable mood.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, like what's going on? And he's like, well, I just hate public speaking. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. He's like, no, I hate it. You know, seriously, I feel so bad.
It's hard to imagine.
And I was like, wow, so like this is hard work for you. And he's like, yeah. You know, I woke up this morning at 3:30 a.m. and my dog was sleeping between my legs. He has 2 dogs. And he was like, I didn't want to get up. I just didn't want to get up. And I was like, well, what happened? He's like, well, I sat there and I asked myself, is there anything that's going to make NVIDIA go bankrupt today? No, right? No, there's nothing. And then he's like, but is there any choice I could make today that could maybe make NVIDIA go bankrupt tomorrow? And he was like, well, maybe. And by 4 a.m., the dog was gone and he was out of bed working. And the other thing Jensen does is he always picks the most important thing that he has to do that day, the most important long-term thing, long-term project for NVIDIA, and that's what he works on first. So from like the hours of 4 to 6 a.m., that's what he's doing.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And then he does the part of his day that he hates, which is like talks at a university.
Oh, really? It's really hard to
hates it.
imagine. Okay, well, that's really interesting to know. And you know, you just say that the semiconductor industry is just like fashion industry.
A little bit, yeah.
His daughter really go work in fashion. That's what a coincidence. I mean, yeah. I'm gonna ask the next question.
Okay.
What impressed me the most when I was reading the book was his experience as a child immigrant in the United States at the Oneida Baptist Institute. Did I pronounce correctly?
It's actually Oneida.
Oneida.
Yeah,
Oneida
confusing,
Baptist
but
Institute. Yeah, Oneida. So that's not a good place to go to. I mean,
no.
Yeah. So as a child in a new environment, you know, he was bullied, isolated, required to clean toilets, and even had to share a room with a knife-wielding fighter.
Yeah.
Wow. Just think about that. Yet he still managed to find ways to grow successfully in school.
Right.
I'm very curious, like, who did you interview to write about this experience? And what do you think was the impact of this experience?
Jensen had talked a fair amount about this himself. He actually loved this school and had given the 2020 commencement address. But I was able to track down his best friend from 6th grade.
You mentioned him.
Yeah, Ben Bays. And so
Ben
this
Bays.
11-year-old boys, they were like best buddies. You know, they were the two kind of best students in the school. But at that school, that just meant that they got beat up every day. You know.
Jesus. Okay.
It was a tough school. It was really a reform academy. It was in one of the poorest counties in the United States. Even today, it's one of the poorest places in the United States. And the kids would fight all the time. They were just constantly fighting. And a lot of them smoked, too. This was like in the 70s.
Wow.
So what impact did this, that, and I also talked to the school principal from that time. Or some of the people who worked at the school, and they knew the history. So that gave me a lot of backstory. What was the impact of this on Jensen? He has said that this was one of the most influential things that ever happened to him.
Yeah. I was surprised.
And I think what it was an experience where he had to learn how to survive when there were no rules. Right? Like,
yes.
Like he's good at homework, he's good at making the teachers like him, but that's very structured.
Right.
There's rules. You follow the rules and then you get rewarded for that. Now suddenly there's no rules. It's kind of the anarchy of the playground. And it's a very tough environment. And to thrive in that requires to learn how to operate in a space where there are no rules.
Right.
Well, in the semiconductor industry especially, there are no rules. In business, often there are no rules.
Yes.
You can't just turn in your homework and expect a good grade. You have to find a way to thrive in a tough environment where there are no rules.
Yes.
And so I think that really taught him a lesson in life. He maintained throughout the rest of his life the greatly disciplined kind of like academic approach to things. He was always turning in his homework. He was always getting good grades. But now suddenly he has this other side of him where he's not just some nerd.
Right, yes.
Right? He can thrive in like a really physically tough environment.
That's impressive. Yeah. I feel like Jensen is a very grateful person.
Oh, yes. He's very much aware that he's had a very fortunate life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's very grateful. And he wants to give back to it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but even though I feel like the experience is not that fortunate to have, but he's still like very grateful for that experience.
You know, I think he felt that it made him tough. I think it taught him resiliency, right? Like
that's optimistic side of him.
Well, he did actually do well there. I think he enjoyed it, honestly, which seems hard to believe, but I think he genuinely had a good time there.
Oh, wow.
I think he felt, you know, there was an aspect of maybe the boy becoming the man a little bit.
Oh, wow. Yeah.